Cords. It's a lovely idea, but it's crazy. Nobody is going to pay for this. They want to raise an army." The old woman smiled at her young friend affectionately, apparently unmoved by his lack of faith. "Did I ever tell you about the old Wintermark Scop I met when I first started studying the history of the Empire? Toppy, he was called." "Yes, Cordelia, you've told me the story more than once." He tried to interrupt, but she ignored him, as she usually did. "His hull was falling into the sea, you know. The sea was just washing the cliffs away. Nothing could be done. All his books were going to be lost, so he set to carrying them all to Gildenheim. Folk laughed at him too. Took him 3 years to move them all back. Back and forth he went, back and forth, patient as a beaver, and he just kept at it until it was done. Well, this is just the same. It will take years too, patient as a beaver, back and forth, and people will laugh, just like they laughed at Toppy." "I've heard the story, Cordelia, but it's different now. There are priorities, and we need another army. We can't do everything. We need to focus on what is possible." No, Aidan, you're quite wrong. That's absolutely the wrong way to think about it. We need to focus on what is impossible. How else will we achieve it? He tried to interrupt again, but Cordelia was not finished speaking. "We don't collect history so that we know what happened, Aidan. What on earth would be the use of that? The point of history is to remind us of all the things we are capable of the things that we can do if only we put our mind to it. Once we built great cities of architecture and beauty and splendour, cities that lived and breathed and fed 1,000,000 people. It's all in the books, Aidan." She smiled at her favourite apprentice. "We don't need an army to beat the Valorn, Aidan. We just need to remember who we are." The Navarre National Assembly passed a number of important judgments at the recent summit. All those that achieved a greater majority were disseminated throughout the territories of Navarre, from the Brock to Liavin's Dance, from Peakedge Stand to Trégy, and all leading to Suresnes. 2 judgments in particular have sparked the imagination of the Navarre, 2 judgments that could not have been more different. The first calls for the creation of a new army to fight the Valorn, and the second speaks of Navarre city of Suresnes and the pride of its citizens. The second statement did not achieve a greater majority, but nonetheless has attracted a great deal of interest, with the nations of the Empire encouraged to look to the strengthening of their own people and lands by the Imperial Synod. Statement of principle raised by Ennis in the General Assembly regarding the city of Suresnes has inspired people across Mearen and beyond. These 2 statements appeal to very different parts of the Navarre nation. The army has an obvious role to play in the present in dealing with the Valorn and in fighting the enemies of the Empire. The status of the city of Suresnes, however, appeals to those Navarre who look to the future, to a time when the Valorn is gone and the people must find a new dream to guide them on their path through the Great Dance. The call to raise a 3rd Navarre army is carried to every corner of the Empire by the Stridings. This isn't the first time in recent years that there has been an attempt to raise a 3rd army. The matter has come up several times in recent years, and there was even a motion in the Senate to that effect during the summer solstice of 380 YE. The motion was abrogated the following summit, and the subject was not raised again until very recently. Precisely why the motion failed is a subject of speculation, but the most common assumption is that it was due to a shortage of materials. Funding an army has always been a challenge for the Navarre. Any army raised by the Empire needs mithril, but the nations never had a steady supply of the precious metal. Whilst wealthy, the Navarre generally lack the great monetary wealth of the League or the Marches. It is difficult to disagree with the National Assembly as to the importance of an army that is specially trained to deal with the Valorn. Such an ability would be unique in the Empire and a vital boon in the endless war against the Navarre's terrible enemy. Surely any price is worth paying to have such a weapon in Navarre hands. The Valorn of the Liathaven have been weakened, and there are those who speculate that if the Valorn of Broceliande can be withstood for long enough, it might likewise be weakened. The Trods have never reached as far or as widely as they do today. The locations of other Valorn-infested ruins of Toruniel have been identified. The presence of the Grey Pilgrims means that there have never been more people trying to actively destroy the Valorn. There is something in the air, and if the Navarre are to make the most of future opportunities to fight their unnatural foe, they may need to act quickly to secure the tools to do so. However, as the one-eyed Vate Aron Blood of Fire points out, there is someone else who enthusiastically supports the idea of the Navarre raising more armies. A potential ally who's already offered their assistance to the Quiet Steppe and seem more than happy to offer continued assistance. He is speaking, of course, of the King of Spiders. The Spider King has offered aid to the Navarre in the past and continues to provide assistance in various ways. Its agents have confirmed that it is prepared to help raise and empower a third army, but before it will do so, it requires the approval of the Imperial Conclave. That approval could be acquired in either of two ways. The Conclave could grant the Eternal Amity. Alternatively, they could pass a declaration of concord explicitly inviting the Patient One to raise its school in Broceliande and offer its assistance to the Navarre in raising their third army. It would not be necessary to pass both, however. Amity would give the Eternal great freedom to act in the Empire. Its heralds could travel as they chose, and the Queen of Scorpions would find it easier to exert its power over Imperial territories. The Declaration of Concord would have a similar effect, but only for the specific task of raising and operating a structure in Broceliande to aid the Navarre. If the Conclave provides their stamp of approval, the Marshal of Centipedes would require no further assistance to raise its training hall. The construction would be formed around a regio in Broceliande, likely in Borsdel or Aleriel, but it is not impossible the Eternal might choose to place it in the Broc. The hall would not require any materials nor need a commission from the Senate. Nothing would be ceded, even if the hall were built in a region under imperial control, and all the work carried out by the Eternal and their heralds. It would be complete within a season. Technically, as Broceliande is outside the Empire, the Silent Hunter does not require the approval of the Conclave, but they're asking for it nonetheless. Most likely because they wish to gain a level of legitimacy for their scheme. Going ahead without Conclave approval runs the risk of magicians of the Empire deciding that they disapprove and punishing those involved. Our Halligan seems keen to avoid this situation. The Eternal may also be aware of the recent violence between the Empire and the Rot Lord and wish to avoid any misunderstandings. Unlike that Eternal, however, our Halligan does not appear to be seeking to control anything in the mortal world. There's no suggestion that the Eternal plans to claim the region where its hall would be, nor that it has any ambitions to spread its influence beyond its walls. Should the declaration be secured, the Navarre could raise an army at the site, allowing them to benefit from the unique training provided by the Heralds of the Wasp Lord. This tuition would allow the Navarre to replace up to 100 wains of mithril with 100 wains of weirwood when raising the army. Navarre soldiers would be taught all the ways that living things prey on and compete with each other, and practice strategies to let them hunt and kill their enemies. They would learn how to crush weaker prey, and how to use poison and disease to enfeeble their enemies, and how to strike at them when they are at their weakest. The new army would gain the Silent Hunter's quality, reflecting the training and skills learned from our Halligan's children. Silent Hunters can use the Tear Down the Weak order when attacking. A pestilent army is able to employ poison and disease to weaken their enemies. Warriors employ deadly poisons on their blades in battle, but the army is also able to employ spring magic to spread poison and disease throughout the land, sapping the strength of any who oppose them. On campaign, they excel at using murderous ambushes to kill and maim as many of the enemy as possible. Heralds and venomous beasts of our Halligan accompany the army, bringing with them the magical might of the Spider King. Tear Down the Weak causes the following effects. Casualties inflicted by this army are increased by 3/10. Also, the ability of this army to conquer territory is reduced by 1/5. The effectiveness of this army against the Valorn is greatly improved. The army will not suffer additional casualties for fighting in a Valorn miasma. It is possible that the Imperial Conclave will not choose to allow an Eternal to create a commission in the Empire. Not so soon after the Highborn were forced to destroy the fortress created by Lofir in Rykos. It is also possible that the Navarre might choose not to accept the gifts of the Silent One. It's clear that the Spider King sees the Navarre as favoured allies among the mortals, but it's not clear that all Navarre see themselves that way. There are some among the Navarre who claim that the nation must stand apart from the harsh ideology of the Eyes in the Dark. These critics do not deny the importance of an army trained to fight the Valorn. They simply suggest that another way must be found. While a Halligan can certainly grant the Navarre the ability to wield the destructive power of spring against their enemies, these critics argue that the Navarre do not need the Eternal's help. The Vates are adept at manipulating the power of the Spring Realm, and the Navarre are among the finest masters of herb lore in the Empire. It wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't be cheap, but the Navarre could focus on their own mastery of spring magic and apothecaries to train a new army to fight the Valorn themselves. This path would require 200 wains of mithril, 50 wains of weirwood, and 500 crowns, but the Navarre could raise an army with the quality Thornbound. Thornbound can use the Poison Thorns order when attacking. The army is able to use their mastery of spring magic and their expertise with herbs to create powerful poisons to apply to their weapons. These poisons are designed to kill quickly and without suffering, ensuring that the enemy do not linger on in pain. Poison Thorns causes the following effects. Casualties inflicted by this army are increased by 3/10. The ability of the army to conquer territory, however, is reduced by 1/5. The effectiveness of this army against the Valorn is improved. The army does not suffer additional casualties for fighting in a Valorn miasma. The army uses their mastery of spring magic and knowledge of the apothecary's art to produce poisons and venoms that they can use in battle. These poisons cause those who succumb to them to pass swiftly and without pain, and are particularly effective against the Valorn. Neither of these opportunities are limited. As long as our Halligan does not have enmity, it is prepared to offer its aid to the Navarre, and as long as the Valorn exists, there will be Navarre prepared to fight it. Exactly how effective Tear Down the Weak or Poison Thorns orders will be at fighting the Valorn is impossible to predict. There has never been an army specifically trained to deal with the Valorn and its spawn before. What is certain is that the use of venom, spring magic, and herb lore will make the army more effective at fighting the Valorn than other armies. Should it become relevant, the Wintermark Special Order Fight with Honour would affect both Tear Down the Weak and Poison Thorns in the same way it affects Fire in the Blood. When people talk of the cities of the Empire, their first thought is the great conurbations of the League. Push them a little further, and some will be able to name Mead in the Marches, Siroc on the Brass Coast, Bastion in Highgard, Kalperheim in Wintermark, and even Gildenheim in Skarsind. Outside the Navarre, surprisingly few would mention the city of Seren in the same breath. Yet it cannot be denied that Seren is a city on par with Mead and the rest. Whilst it might lack walls or clustered buildings of the cities in other nations, this is simply because the city covers so much more land, and the population is much more spread out. Seren is composed of a number of large steadings joined by a well-maintained wooded paths and bridges. From the ruins of the Turuniel city that was once the heart of the Valorn, the Navarre have created an idyllic homeland, a vision of what the future could hold once the great enemy is finally defeated. All remnants of wild growth have been eradicated. In their place, the Navarre have cultivated avenues of tall trees to mark the paths, and cleared expansive glades, allowing the sunlight to pour in and warming the ground below. As you draw closer to the ruins, there are carefully planted flower beds that produce a riot of colours when they open their petals. The city has become a testimony to what humanity can achieve when the natural world is tamed by the ambitions of civilized people. More than anything, Seren proves that when suitably tended, nature can be both benign and beautiful. Despite this, Seren is so often overlooked, not just by the Empire, but sometimes by the Navarre themselves. Brands and Thorns can spend so long locked in battle with the Valorn that sometimes they forget what they're fighting for. The Vates may forget that their promise to Navarre and Thorn was not to avenge the fall of Teruniel, but to restore it. Seren is the legacy of the Navarre. It is the dream made real. It is what the Navarre are fighting for. Ennis's judgment did not receive a greater majority in the General Assembly, but in the current climate it achieved enough support to inspire the people of Navarre nonetheless. It is not enough for the Empire to simply say Seren is a city, however. That's too easy and will have a minimal effect. Instead, the people of Miaren have put forward 4 far-reaching projects, any one of which could cement the importance and prominence of Seren as one of the great cities of the Empire. The 4 proposals are mutually exclusive. Each one requires not only the construction of a key building, but also a degree of reshaping of the city itself to support that structure. First up is the City of Flowers. The Navarre are widely acknowledged to be masters of the herbal arts in the Empire. They played a pivotal role in the discovery of Liao and, by extension, True Liao, for example. Miaren is already the site of dozens of well-tended gardens that produce crops of vital herbs. Some are used to help in the fight against the Valorn, some are used to support the Navarre armies, some are sold to the physics and apothecaries of other nations. One noted apothecary, Bronwyn of the Silver Falls, proposes that by applying some organisation, the herb gardens of Seren could be harnessed to provide a truly wondrous bounty of magical herbs to the Navarre people. And by harnessing those gardens, Seren could earn the title of the City of Flowers. When the Valorn was cleared from Miaren over 200 years ago, the ruins of the old city of Seren were left largely alone. The Valorn heart was uprooted and destroyed, and the ruins themselves preserved as a monument to, and reminder of, the past. Over time, they were largely transformed into a garden, rich with beautiful flowers and rare plants. Bronwyn proposes to expand these gardens, and then build 7 more dedicated public garden parks in a great ring around them. Some of these gardens would grow true vervain, imperial roseweed, and marrowwort alongside flowering plants and fruit trees. Others would be enclosed beneath great greenhouses and used to grow cerulean mazarine, bladeroot, and other plants that prosper best in controlled environments. The stridings of the Navarre crisscross the Empire and, these days, even travel beyond its borders. Navarre mariners visit distant shores and trade with the inhabitants of faraway lands. All would be encouraged to bring back samples of exotic and unfamiliar plants to be cultivated in the gardens of the heart, to the benefit of all people in Navarre. The garden at the heart of Seren itself would be tended by a cadre of the finest gardeners and herbalists in Navarre, who would be encouraged to share their knowledge with students. Not only Navarre students either. It's likely that apothecaries and physics from across the Empire would be interested in travelling to Seren to study with the finest Navarre herbalists. Bronwyn's plans would require 70 wains of weirwood, 20 wains of white granite, 10 wains of mithril, and cost 200 crowns to build. The gardens could only be commissioned using a Senate motion and would take 3 seasons to build. Once complete, they would create the title of Brand of the Garden City, whose responsibilities would include overseeing and increasing the prosperity of the standing city of Seren. In return, the brand would receive a bounty of 35 herbs each season, 5 of each type. In addition, the gardens of Seren would provide a bounty of 90 herbs, spread between the herb gardens of Miaren each season. Unlike a great work, however, the herbs provided would vary by season. During summer, the herb gardens of Miaren would produce additional cerulean mazarine. During autumn, they would produce marrowwort. In winter, they would produce bladeroot, and in spring, they would produce imperial roseweed. Perhaps most importantly, however, a wonder on this scale would cement Seren's status as the garden city of the Empire, a recognition of its status and natural beauty. It would become a haven for students of herb lore across the Empire, but also a beacon for the study of the arts. This would likely lead to future opportunities, in keeping with the prominence of the city. However, it's not only magical herbs that are gathered by the people of Miaran. The territory is known for producing large amounts of vinum. It's a raw sap which is then used to produce liao. Miaran produces more vinum than any other single territory in the Empire, and much of that production is centred in the gentle woodlands around the steadings of Seren. Many of the plants are refined in Seren, and it's said that when the workers are preparing the sap, the smell is so intoxicating that it is common to experience a dreamy feeling of lightheadedness. The vinum does not put people to sleep, but it can produce the most vivid daydreams in those who work with it for too long. And when they sleep at night, they often experience profound dreams that are almost visionary in nature. It is for this reason that it is called the dream harvest by those who work to gather it. The dreams produced by exposure to the partially refined liao are not mere fancies. Rather, they're similar in nature to the kind of dream a priest can cultivate through their understanding of the dedication ceremony. While unguided, they can often contain images that reflect the concerns or challenges the dreamer faces in their life. A skilled guide can help interpret those dreams and perhaps help the dreamer understand their concerns or face the challenges that lie before them. It is perhaps not a surprise that the Dream Harvest also attracts a number of guides, many of whom have made a great study of dreams and gained much insight from working with those who labour at the harvest. Guides play a crucial role in Navarre society, helping people find their right place in the world. The various settlements that make up Seren count many guides among their number, and scores more who've been helped by them. Despite this, the city has no great places of worship, no numinous construction to uplift the human spirit and inspire them in their pursuit of the seven virtues or in their understanding of the great dance. Dradan of River Falls is an old guide. He spent most of his life travelling the Empire looking to help people find their way in the way. But his journeys always bring him back to Seren. Now he's too old to travel easily, so he spent the last decade advising pilgrims and passing on 7 decades of wisdom to younger guides. He has a proposal that would make Seren a true equal to the other cities of the Empire. A great temple, dedicated to the study of the way and the practical examination of the virtues. In particular, it could be a place where the Navarre guides can explore how their understanding of the great dance interlocks with the teachings and the doctrines of the way. Dradan proposes to create a grand temple of the waking dream, place of faith and virtue, big enough to rival the cathedrals of Highgard but be built in harmony with the existing gardens and steadings of Seren. It would stand as a testament to both the philosophy of the great dance and the teachings of the way. In addition to the temple itself and the extensive gardens that surround it, the project would include building wayhouses and shrines suitable for use by both pilgrims and students of spirituality and religion. It would attract guides and pilgrims from across the Empire, especially those who, for whatever reason, were dissatisfied with their lives and wished to find new purpose or a new way of living. Dradan's plans are exquisitely beautiful, echoing the most adept techniques used to build many of the finest buildings in Seren. Part of the plans include incorporating much of the current work refining vinum sap into chambers within the temple, which would be a place of industrious prosperity as well as contemplation and study. Presence of the Dream Harvest within the main building would mean that the fragrance of raw vinum would permeate everywhere through the building, producing exotic and vivid dreams in those who stayed long enough to gain the full benefits of their visit. Dreams that Dradan and his fellow guides could interpret. Such construction would not be cheap. It would require 90 wains of weirwood, 30 wains of white granite, and 30 thrones on labour costs. It'd need a Senate motion to commission it, and it would take 9 months to build. As a place of pilgrimage, the Temple of the Waking Dream would provide every Navarre congregation in Miaran with a share of 80 synod votes and 40 doses of liao each season, as if it were a great work. At the same time, the temple would create a new imperial title, the Dreamer's Guide, who would receive 10 liao and 20 votes in the synod each season, appointed annually by the Navarre Assembly. The guide would oversee the temple, but also look to the prominence and the prosperity of the city of Seren and the many pilgrims passing through. If the Navarre chose, they could give the Dreamer's Guide the responsibility to guide the National Assembly, effectively turning the commission into the seat of the leader of the National Assembly, with responsibilities similar to those of the Speaker of the Highborn Assembly. These would include guiding the Navarre National Assembly, ensuring its traditions are upheld, chairing the meetings of the National Assembly, encouraging the priests of Navarre to vote on judgments in the synod, to express the will of their congregations, and to share the spiritual understanding of the nation with the rest of the empire. With a centre for spiritual study such as this, the calling of the dream speaker would be pushed into greater prominence, creating a new archetype for Navarre characters. A priest who focuses on interpreting dreams and using the dedication ceremony to foster such dreams with an eye towards helping people understand the route through the great dance that was right for them. Duradan speaks of dream speakers as people who would help the Navarre to remember their dreams, to remember that once they dreamed of something more than just unending war with the Valorn, that they stood for something, not just against something. He believes that the dream speakers could help the Navarre put words to their dreams, to imagine a future greater than the one the Navarre hold now. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Seren would be fixed in the minds of the Empire as the City of Dreams. Not just the dreams of those using Liao and Vinum, but also the dream of a world free of Valorn, where every human finds their place within the great dance. Miaran, after all, is a dream of the future made real, a place where the Valorn has no sway, and where the people are free to explore what it means to be Navarre, once they're free of their responsibility to make restitution for the mistakes of the past. The Navarre are perhaps best known as travellers and warriors against the Valorn, but they're also a people with a long history and a deep appreciation of learning. The Great Library of Hercynian is one example of the Navarre's commitment to scholarship. They know the terrible cost when a civilization loses its books and its scholars. In the mad scrabble for survival after the disaster that destroyed Taruniel, the art and stories of 1,000 years were lost in a matter of decades. Cordelia of Winter's Sorrow is a historian who's travelled to every corner of the Empire in her long life. She has, at various times, been employed by the Department of Historical Research and has taken many students with her on her long walks across the Empire. The respected nomadic scholar, Eileen Sweetwater, is one of her apprentices, for example. She has long been an outspoken proponent of the role of Navarre in gathering and spreading knowledge, in fostering greater understanding between the nations of the Empire, and in undoing the devastating blow to imperial scholarship inflicted by Emperor Nikovar. With that in mind, she proposes the construction of a great library at Seren, and that the city be dedicated to creating the largest single storehouse of imperial knowledge ever seen. At the height of Taruniel, Seren was a city known for its scholars and poets, and for both colleges and military academies. All were destroyed when the Valorn consumed the city. The Navarre spent decades sifting those ruins for lost lore after the territory was liberated from the Valorn, only to see much of their work lost once more when Nikovar started burning the libraries. In a year, the Mad Emperor destroyed and scattered what had taken centuries to gather together. Perhaps understandably, ever since then there's been a singular reticence to create a new centralised storehouse of knowledge, for fear that a second Nikovar might again set the Empire teetering on the brink of a new dark age of ignorance. Some people even claim that Nikovar's madness was for the best, that it is safer to have knowledge spread through every household in the Empire rather than kept in one place. Who would store that knowledge? Who could protect it? But perhaps really what puts people off is the sheer cost of creating and supporting such a structure. To create a large library, a commission big enough to actually store a substantial number of important texts, is expensive, eye-wateringly so. Undeterred by these facts, Cordelia proposes to create a great library at Seren, the first since Nikovar's time, which she proposes be named Isaella's Legacy. The plans that have been created for the library are truly impressive. A great building of wood and stone so vast it would require 100 wains of weirwood, 50 wains of white granite, and 300 crowns to construct. It would need a Senate motion to commission it and would take a full year to build. The resulting structure would have an upkeep of 10 thrones a season from the imperial treasury. The time taken to actually construct the building would be nothing compared to how long it would take to fill with scrolls and tomes and books. That would take decades. But the Navarre can make a legitimate claim that Seren is the perfect place for Isaella's legacy to be constructed. Because of Miarin's central location in the Empire, more Stridings visit the territory than any other. By working with the Stridings that visit the territory, the scribes who worked in the library could create copies of books and rare texts from all across the Empire. Over time, the city of Seren would become the Empire's memory, as perhaps it was once before. It's difficult to estimate what the full benefits of building Isaella's legacy would be, but it would be invaluable to historians and researchers looking into the past. Once the construction is complete, the Empire's ability to carry out historical research would be permanently increased, granting them an additional opportunity to commission research each season. There is some concern that the library would immediately become a target for enemies of the free exchange of knowledge, such as the Whisper Gallery or the Feathered Serpent. After some extensive discussion with her old colleague, Leontes the Scribe, the Imperial Archivist has proposed moving the entire Department for Historical Research to Seren, if Isaella's legacy is built. This would allow the money the Senate is already paying to protect the scholars and professors associated with the department to also protect the librarians and the scribes at Isaella's legacy. Most importantly, Isaella's legacy would cement Seren's status as the City of Leaves, as well as providing a fitting and lasting memorial to the life of one of the most renowned Navarre to ever have lived. To get one of these great commissions completed is an extremely ambitious undertaking. The people of Miarin are realistic about the chances of success. It would be easy to build something less grand, something less ambitious. A few sinecures in Seren designed to take advantage of the fertile soil to produce herbs would be much more easily achieved and would still help the city. They would be welcomed by everyone who lives here and likely make the city more prosperous. But a smaller commission would do nothing to fundamentally alter the status of Seren as one of the great cities of the Empire in the eyes of those who live outside its bounds. It would continue to be overlooked, just as it is today. To change that requires a significant construction, such as one of the things described here. Something that could give Seren the prominence it richly deserves among the Navarre and the Empire as a whole. But the inhabitants of Seren hope that those who voted for Enos's judgment will be inspired by their ideas and commit themselves to the task of building one of these wonders, even if it takes a lifetime. If successful, any of them would likely lead to future opportunities in keeping with the new prominence of the city. Because of this patience, none of these opportunities will expire while Miarin remains in imperial control. The inhabitants of Seren have been inspired by Enos's judgment, but the Navarre have spent centuries fighting the Valorn. They understand the importance of patience. They understand that achieving something truly monumental takes time. If one or more of the leaders of the Navarre is inspired to take up the challenge, then the people who live here will give them their full support, no matter how many years it takes.